Hello?
Hey, are you okay?
Where are we?
Jesus, we need to get that looked at. Come on, come back upstairs.
Where is everyone?
I don't know. It's just right down here. So. Okay, just stay there for 1 second, and I will find someone to come look at your eye. What's your name? Hey. Hey.
Just come on.
We're about to look at some footage that has been locked away for decades. These will be outtakes from Friday the 13th final chapter. There is no audio with this material. It was found just as silent daily outtakes. So I'll be talking us through as it plays. Oh, there you go. As you can see, it's a cut hacksaw that bleeds, one of Tom Savini's signature tools. Of course, the difficulty is Jason has to hold the weapon very close to the throat so that you can believe it's embedded in there. Some of this is pretty disgusting. You believe he is actually sawing it. And then the trick for director and actor is to sync up the character's movement with the movement of the saw. The problem here, as you can see in this, crappy outtake, is that if the actor moves a lot, he pulls it away from his neck. If he doesn't move, it doesn't look like he's having his throat cut. So the outtake is limited in its value. It's lovely, isn't it? There he is, getting a dose of red Caro syrup, so he can bleed as his head is twisted. Ted White's hands twisting the head. A false body and a real Bruce. Actually, in the end, we used only shots of the real Bruce. We had made a casting of his head, but didn't use those. Here's a gutting of a nurse outtake. As you can see, weapon is bleeding before we start, but oh, there she goes. There's a jump cut in there. I guess a piece of the material has been taken out and used in the actual film. And this looks a little strange, but yeah, there you go. Well, all the tricks are revealed, aren't they? That's how Jason lifts a nurse. Yeah. Now, this was a tough one because we don't have we can't hide in darkness here because it's an exterior, day exterior. So this false neck, you sort of can see you can see the way it doesn't quite, match her the makeup on her face. But in the end, in the film, we did some timing, color timing, to help ourselves. The thing about all of these scenes that you're looking at here is that they are really raw dailies of outtakes, things we thought weren't really good enough, and they haven't been treated in ways which we ultimately treated the material we used. But in any case, you can see, again, it's the combination of the acting, the drooling actress in that case, and and the effect. We shoot these with multiple cameras, so there will be tighter shots and wider ones, and some shots are established only to use a tiny little piece, maybe the appearance of Jason. And this, for example, there was an edit. We had cut this scene in such a way that it really was, I thought, much better than what's finally used in the film. It's really horrific because of, this illustrates her performance, which is horrible. If you can hear the soundtrack, I mean, just the shrieks that she played and that she did, the bloodletting from Savini's effect, and the piercing of the false piece of her back. Now, of course, with the proper color timing, it is much more convincing. Now this shot is really done on the water besides, and it's the business of holding the piece down, the actor, and having the effect. He is rigged to be lifted out of the water on wires, and as you can see, the wires didn't always work exactly the way we wanted them to. I mean, we only needed a small piece. That's John Sherrod, who just came in with a cowboy hat. He was our stunt coordinator at the time. You can see these wires, and then we had to treat them. We didn't have the benefit of CGI back then, but we had to try to obscure them with other processes. But he was suspended and lifted. There's Crispin. Now that's a reverse action shot where you start out with the cut piece of. That's right, as you can see, the cut piece against his face, pulling it away, and then reversing it so that it appears to be whacking him. Now, of course, you can see there is Jason without the mask, Ted White, in his Ted White, glorious appearance, ducking into the shot back there. There it is. And again, as discussed before, we placed it between his eyes because it seemed much more horrific. As you can see, that's much more difficult to watch than what we finally used in the film. So there was a possibility to cut a version, which of course everyone would have objected to, except a few of you demented viewers. But Crispin really played it, and it is pretty ugly and convincing. Crispin loved doing his death scene. I mean, he couldn't wait to do this. And as you can see, the giant grin at the end. Ah, yes. Ted cleaning the weapon, something I've used in other movies. I don't know, it's some obsession of mine. Now, as you can see, this was not a first take. The window's already broken. And she flies through. Something interesting about that slow motion, look at that. Look at her sailing there. There's something interesting about these shots. I mean, it was totally possible to have used one of those. There's the, there she is hitting the roof of the car. This is a take that wasn't used. I ultimately had him do it over again because I didn't like the way she hit the car. So you'll see that in the one that's in the film, the car's already dented because I used take 2. As you can see, an obvious casting of Lawrence's head, but it doesn't appear so in the final cut version. Tom always, tries to advise us to use a real hand or real body part along with any casting, so it helps sell the illusion. The important part here, you can see in the shadow, the implement in the back of the head. Okay, be careful that Ted doesn't creep into the shot. And again, rigged to bleed, his hand rigged to bleed for the breaking of the nose. As you can see, this could have been much more horrible had we used more of the shot. There we are, all reflected. There's the casting of the head, but of course intended to only, that's pretty hideous. That is ugly. But intended to be used only in the smallest few frames. Frankly, even in the final cut, to my way of thinking, I've left it on the screen too long, so I wish we had even trimmed it more. But in any case, this is intended to be just a few frame cut in between the real actor, the real hands, and yeah, there you go. And it looks like that little piece might have been more convincing than the one we used. So given the opportunity, we'd recut it. There you go. You can see all the tricks there. All right. Now she, as you can see, has the blade already implanted. Can't stand the idea of doing the scene apparently, but she's ready to do it. There you go. She's into the scene, and they throw some sticks at her foolishly. We did this a little bit better in the final version, where we actually put an air cannon behind the door and blow the thing up. And this cornball, attempt is, well, there it is. That's the trainer holding up I think some kind of a stuffed rabbit or something, trying to lure Gordon out the window. Gordon loves stuffed rabbits, or whatever the heck toy it was. And there he goes. Of course, you can see his tail come up, so he's only jumping that little way out and caught on the mattress. But that is a nice breakaway. Even the second try. Well, there's a third sort of try. That's okay. Second trainer comes and recaptures Gordon, and there you go. Here's the other side. Gordon helps himself out a little bit, but does take the dive. In the end, we made it of a couple of pieces. There you go. That's Rob, or actually a stuntman doing an impression of Rob going through the window there. Okay, throwing the thing over, but ultimately the composition, was such that we wouldn't have wanted to stay on that. He locked him almost trapped himself in the door. Crispin nailed to the doorway, ripped away. Now, we used an insert in the final version of his hand, so you could see the hand being literally torn by the spike that's through it. So that's intended to be both sides of the cut, but the close-up on the hand is what you needed to be able to sell. And there is, of course, Crispin being Crispin. Oh, there she goes. That's, as you can tell, undercranked, so she seems to be falling out faster than she did. And matching the position that she fell in. There you go. Pretty brutal at that speed, but looks unreal. Looks fake at that speed. So we ultimately used something that seemed more realistic. That drop wasn't used. The splitting of the hand, which I actually sat in a movie theater on opening day and heard a fan, after Jason's hand was split by this machete, a fan sitting in front of me said, "Now Jason's mad," as if all the other things that happened to him really didn't impress him. There you go, the splitting of the hand, again done in reverse action. And there is the hideous split hand, a little too crude. As you could see, Kimberly is in character from before she starts, gets a little blood in her eye, but there she goes, the trooper goes again. There's Ted, who, in to his credit, encouraged the actors to really encounter him and whack him with whatever it is they were using. So Ted took a lot of beating on behalf of the film and has helped the film tremendously by doing that. We knew the unmasking of Jason was going to be a very important piece. The dropping of the mask and how it would fall, of course, because the iconic mask had to land just where we needed it to land. So many false attempts on these things until we got the one that we ultimately used. There you go. It was not used with a foot pushing it into position, I might add, yeah. Oh, there you go. Reverse action of the machete in Jason's head. Ted requesting it a little higher. And so there you go. Little Corey has to be able to maneuver this per direction. But Ted is really playing the scene perfectly as he falls. Again, these are issues of lighting, and the way you're seeing it here, it would not be the way we finally color timed it for the film. But also, we need to keep much of this in the dark so that you can't see the details of the way the effect is done. And there always is way more blood than we could possibly use, but there are a few of you out there that think otherwise. Oh, that's lovely, isn't it? Pulling the thing out and putting it back in. No, as we've discussed earlier, the puppet is really manipulated by lots of people. Make it bleed, manipulate the tongue, facial movement. It does all kinds of things. So, had we used just a tiny piece of that, there you are. And this gets even more hideous because it really separates from the, it's the skull totally separates. We could have cut a version that would have been believable. Of course, when you see it in the long form like this, it's not believable. But we could have cut a version using just a few frames of that would have been believable, but way too hideous for most audience. We were told, and we believed, that part 4 was going to be the final chapter. I mean, final chapter as in no more Jason, no more Fridays, no more nothing. Therefore, it was going to be a movie about the death of Jason.
It was one of the oddest script developments I've ever been in. We worked speedily on this, and that's probably the reason that Zito wanted to leave that room with a script that he would bleed for.
I thought I would never hear from the Friday the 13th people again after the first one, because 2 went by. They did not offer me part 3. But the idea of offering me the film where I get to kill Jason made me feel like Dr. Frankenstein. I created a monster, and I get to kill him.
I thought the most interesting way to deal with a movie about the death of Jason was to bookend it with the dead Jason. We had to go back to the location where Friday 3 was shot and re-stage how it might have been. So the shot that got designed came down from the beam of the helicopter overhead, came down with it on a crane. And the Steadicam operator was actually standing on the crane, steps off the crane and starts to move, and he keeps going and running back and forth. And in the end, the idea is to go through all of this and reveal the dead Jason. I wanted you to be in the presence of the dead Jason so long that in the end, I was hoping that audiences would start cheering him to life. Then they become the authors of his resurrection. And they take the responsibility for that. I don't have to sell it to them. They're, in fact, demanding it. We went through a bunch of guys. We auditioned Jasons and found Ted White, who was a very experienced Hollywood stunt guy.
But what I had done prior to coming on to the show, I had gone down and rented number 2, I think it was 2 or 3, and I watched the way they moved, the way Jason moved, and I decided that I didn't want him to be a big, clumsy oaf. So I did change it. I changed it to where I moved faster, and I tried to make the kills a little swifter.
I remember being on the set one day, and I said something about how he should twist the head on Bruce Mahler. And I remember him saying, look, you do the makeup effects, and I'll do the stunts, meaning he knows what to do physically and I. So he got up and he walked away. I looked at Kevin Yeager and I went, and I just jumped up and I followed Ted and I stopped him. I said, you know what, when you said that, it offended me because I've done stunts. He says, yeah, I heard that about you. Everybody thought the next thing was going to be a punch, to my head. And from that moment on, we became pals.
The casting of Kimberly in this role was, I think, a really good piece of business for us because she really takes Jason on physically. This is not someone who just, screams and faints. This is someone who fights him with a hammer and pounds him into the mask.
The scenes where I was actually fighting with Ted White, who played Jason, they were really pretty violent. He's a stuntman and I'm not. And we really fighting.
The casting of this boy was a big deal, and we saw a lot of kids, and nothing seemed right. And they finally brought in this young Corey Feldman, who had experience, he had acted.
The scenes with Corey Feldman were great. He was a really sweet boy. I related to him because I was a child actor, and I had a lot of empathy for him.
He was a mean little kid. When I say mean, he was very, very active on the set. He wasn't very well-mannered. And when I finally got to the scenes where we were upstairs and I had my hand so close to him that I could have gotten a hold of him.
Still, he could take direction and he knew the lines and he would do them and do them over again and wasn't cranky and wasn't childlike. He was professional.
I have to say this, as mean as he was very good in the film. I liked him. I liked the way he did it and I liked the way he worked. I felt like he had the energy of an adult as opposed to that of a kid.
Some of the kills in the film were designed by script in advance, cooked up, in the writing process. More of the kills, or some of the better kills, I think, were designed once we had all the special effects people aboard.
When Jason kills the nurse, I had tubing glued to her leg so the blood would trickle down the side of her leg. But the tubing had come loose. So when Jason was killing her, there was just a squirt of blood from right in the middle between her legs, hit the floor and formed a puddle. And she peed blood.
Hey, honey, you got a sister?
Tom sat down and went through with me exactly physiologically what would happen if I was being stabbed through the throat, that it would pierce the voice box, that, you know, all the things that it would go through and what would happen to you, what would happen to your voice, so that I could incorporate that as an actor. He had his hand on my head, but you will be absolutely safe, but don't fight me.
I think, though, the kill that meant the most to me was the kill of Rob in the basement.
I'm expecting that Tom Savini's going to come up with some way to hack as much of my flesh away as possible.
But you don't see that. You don't see any of the Tom Savini stuff that he designed, really.
We didn't want the audience to laugh when I died. He wanted to go to a more level of psychological horror than physical.
There were some arguments along the way, and one of those arguments was about the death of the mother.
We see that she's had an encounter with Jason. We know it hasn't turned out well. We never saw the actual poking or anything that went on. We didn't see any gutting or anything, no tools, implements, blood, but we're pretty sure she got it.
And the idea to me of kids watching a mother figure being ripped was extremely exciting. They're used to seeing kids being essentially punished for their loss of innocence. To see mom punished, that's grotesque.
The studio thought it would be a cool idea to have a dream sequence because it sort of relates to, part one, the original Friday the 13th.
I was originally told that this would be the last of the Jason movies, and I was told specifically to use my best screenwriting grammar to indicate that Jason is really dead. We're not kidding, really most sincerely dead.
We spent the entire shoot redesigning how Jason might get killed. There were a lot of ways. There were all kinds of suggestions.
You know, I had a death that I thought would work that involved a microwave oven, where Tommy was also a little amateur inventor, and he had a little variable, took a microwave oven apart, put a reflector behind the microwave shooter, and melted a toy soldier on 1, and the thing went up to 10. I thought at the end, when Jason is chasing his sister, Tommy could jam this thing into Jason's head and turn up to 10 and cook Jason's head from within and make it explode.
But as we got close to the end, it became clear that the best idea was the most direct one, because what happens is it lets your characters really do the killing.
So I asked Joe for 2 things. 1, can I take his mask off? Joe said yes. I said, 2, can I have him touch Trisha's breast? And Joe said no. I think the act of touching the breast would have rendered him so completely human that he has finally thought of something else to do with girls that doesn't involve killing them. That was the moment that he was completely vulnerable, as we all are in moments of love. And so what I did was I wrote a scene where instead of cutting his head off, which in a sequel he could walk around with it under his arm or in a box, I split his head open from top to bottom with that machete, the way you cut an artichoke in half. And I thought that was at least sufficiently different to think, okay, this is over.
But John Vulich one day held up the Dawn of the Dead machete that I put into Lonnie Lisa's head. I said, that's it. We'll have Tommy whack Jason in the head with the machete, but let's go further and have Jason fall on his knees, fall on the machete, and slide down the blade.
And then I get not a rewrite, but an update on how we're not really going to put the machete through his head from top to Adam's apple, but we're going to do something different, like through the eye. And I knew then that they were leaving room for a sequel.
Every death was fast. And then when Jason died, it was slow. So having to trim the effects down to perhaps satisfy the ratings board helped in punching up the effectiveness and the shock of Jason's death, because we got to show that.
I wanted to leave something for people to build on for the subsequent series. And so I wanted Tommy Jarvis to sort of catch the germ of menace that Jason had. And that's why I was building him slowly into a character who at the end could become Jason.
That scene in the hospital room where I had to put my hand around him, and they said for me to put my hand at the base of his neck so that I would hide the wrinkles from the skull cap.
There's a scene that's not in the film where Tommy is at the water fountain. And so when he turns around, water is dripping from his lips in the way that the original little skinny Jason from the first was dripping water. So Tommy was always somebody I thought would live again.
As far as I'm concerned, we killed Jason. I mean, we really killed Jason in Final Chapter.
I can't believe it's been 25 years since I shot that movie. And I never in a million years would have guessed that it would have had such a huge following like it has.
You know, after this, he wandered around cities and moons and stuff like this, whatever he did. I'm glad that he's out there and we can enjoy him some more. But we really did him in as far as I can tell. Now here's some material that we that was found long after the edit was completed and the film had played for many years, and this new material was shot for an ending that was contemplated but never used. And to my way of thinking, it's a good thing for us, for all of us, and for the film that it was not used. It was sort of a morning after sequence.
And that's the house that we shot everything in. It's in Topanga Canyon. I can't believe the damage we did to this house. So this is after everything, and I guess we've passed out after everybody's gone, and it's just the two of us there. You know, it's so sad that they've lost the soundtrack to this clip. So the sound element's gone. So I think I can hear something over at the other house. And I'm saying, over here, I'm talking to the police. I'm yelling for the police to come over here. Over here, I'm gonna go get somebody. Go get them. And that's Eric Anderson, who's dead. He got thrown through the window. I was so sick of wearing that man's shirt. They had about 5 of them, and that's all I wore, with a belt.
They follow the water drip and discover some horrific thing, which turns out to be part of a dream sequence. And this was done because the other Friday the 13th movies had this terrifying dream sequence at the end.
I think the character kind of knows that what's there. I'm saying, oh, Mom. And I found my mom. I remember just being in such a hysterical, crying place. And it was so scary.
It's oh, there you go. I plagiarizing myself from another movie. But no, we never made it to the film, and you didn't get to see that until just now.
Shocking mass murders at Crystal Lake, tonight on Ion News.
I just can't believe it. We are never going to feel safe in Crystal Lake again.
I think it's pretty easy. It was drugs, I tell you. It's a shame. Kids and drugs. I'd bet my last dollar on it.
More bodies have been found literally strewn across the 5-square-mile campground, leaving officials and residents stunned in the wake of what will forever be known as the Crystal Lake Massacre.
Crystal Lake was founded in 1666 by Lars Kruger. For almost 100 years, we were known for our All Hallows Eve festival, which we shared with our neighbors in Haddonfield. In the summers, when the corn was high, the children would play along the fields that grew out by Old Craven Road. But these are not the things that Crystal Lake is remembered for.
Yeah, I grew up here in Crystal Lake. This town wouldn't even be on the map if it wasn't for what happened at that summer camp.
Crystal Lake has the highest murder rate per capita in the US of A.
Maybe even the world.
Higher than Detroit. Over 300 homicides since the 1980s.
That's when things got really bad.
Didn't it all start with some kid drowning in the lake or something?
No one really knows what happened to him. You know, they say that he went and started living in the woods like a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch or a Yeti or a bear, you know, something like that.
Most folks around here, well, there's one name in particular you don't want to mention if you know what's good for you.
Josh? Hold on.
You know, you guys want to dig up bad memories for everybody. They don't want to fucking relive this shit.
Johnny, Ian.
Why are you so afraid to answer questions? You know what? Get the fuck out of here.
Jason! That's it, Jason, dude.
We got tourists coming from all over the world looking for this Jason. We got rednecks with rifles organizing their weekend Jason hunting trips. We've got a constant problem with kids. They're trespassing on the condemned campgrounds.
The campground is pretty cool. I love going there. It's pretty dark and it's kind of scary, but I don't really believe anyone was killed there or anything.
Weirdest thing we got is a freaking cult of Jason worshippers. They pray to the guy.
We are the Voorhees 5. We know the truth. We have the power to resurrect Jason Voorhees. This isn't the final chapter. This is a new beginning. Jason lives.
I'm here to tell you, we're not going to stand for that kind of weirdness around here.
I think that I have definitively proven in my book that every murder that has occurred at Crystal Lake has been the act of a copycat killer, several copycat killers, all of whom have adopted the Jason persona to cover their tracks.
Now, there are some so-called experts out there who shall remain nameless, Clifford Blair, and they would have you believe that the murders at Camp Blood after '79 were all committed by copycats. Copycats. If that's the case, how do you explain the indestructible killer?
Explain the eyewitness sightings. Explain the physical evidence left at the camp.
We have a website that I created on my spare time from the copy mat, www.crystalllakecoverup.net.
We had 50 visitors last month.
We are getting our message out there.
Fan that guy.
You can't hide the truth. It's like the worm in the apple. It finds its way out.
Yeah, I've seen Jason, I saw him out in the yard, and at first I saw this, he was really tall, really tall, broad shoulders. I saw him from the back, and I got real excited because I thought it was my ex-boyfriend Rex who'd come to surprise me and let me know he got out of prison early, but he turned around and it was not, it's too bad because he's a very tall man.
Here's what we do know about Jason Voorhees. He was born on Friday, June 13th, 1947. On his birth certificate, his father's listed as Elias Voorhees, but we don't know much about him. It's possible that he left Pamela, Jason's mother, when he found out that their son was born with certain problems.
In today's medical terms, Jason's birth defects might have been diagnosed as a form of Proteus syndrome or possibly even neurofibromatosis. Both are childhood congenital disorders that cause atypical bone development and grotesque tumors along the face and body. Jason could have been misdiagnosed with hydrocephalus or even a parasitic condition, which was thought to have affected John Merrick, who is better known as the Elephant Man.
My family founded the summer camp at Crystal Lake. My father had this dream of wanting a place for underprivileged children to come and learn and just have a good time once a year. I went there myself. It was a beautiful place to grow up. And then all that changed when he hired Pamela Voorhees as his cook.
I remember Pamela. Nice, beautiful, pretty girl. Very quiet. She had the son, Jason, if I remember well. Yeah, Jason, yes. She kept the boy sheltered from other children because of his condition.
She really cared for Jason. She took care of him. She was always watching over him, even when she was cooking in the kitchen. She was always watching over him, even when she was cooking in the kitchen in the camp. We teased him sometimes, me and the other kids, and she'd go crazy when we did that and yell at us and almost threaten to scare the hell out of us. We were like 9 or 10 years old. We didn't know what we were doing. But we were almost more afraid of Mrs. Voorhees than we were of Jason.
Jason, he drowned. Very sad, he drowned because he was supposed to be watched by somebody. Oh, it was a tragedy. Very bad thing to happen. But it happened.
And everybody came out, they dragged the lake, they found nothing.
Pamela had to be subdued, taken away. She spent 6 months in an institution. When she was released, no one heard from her. She moved on, moved away. Or so we thought.
So in '79, this new camp's going to open, right?
That's right. And Steve Christie comes in. He's inherited the place from his folks. He's going to set things up straight. It's been years since the camp's been open. He's going to get it back rolling. So he hires some counselors from upstate, including some girls. And guess what? Enter Pamela Voorhees.
By this time, she has gone apeshit insane.
Woman is a loony.
One by one, she killed them. My brother. All those kids. But only one survived.
One of the greatest stories I've ever heard in my life. Dude, 2 girls going at it, like the straight WWE knockout style. And this cute, this freaking ridiculously hot girl, chops off this old woman's head, like out of nowhere. I mean, that is one thing I wish I could have been there to see.
But maybe Mrs. Voorhees had a point, because I love my kids. My kids are the whole world to me. And if anybody did anything to my 7 kids, maybe I'd go whack the motherfucker.
Pamela Voorhees was insane, plain and simple. None of the counselors had anything to do with her son's drowning. They didn't deserve this. They didn't deserve to die that way. None of them did.
Because of the almost Oedipal nature of the relationship between this mother and her only child,
Jason's death forced Mrs. Voorhees to have an almost complete break from reality. She felt that she needed to, in a sense, give him life again, as only a mother could.
Pamela's death was the beginning and the end of the Voorhees legacy at Crystal Lake, despite what you might hear from certain people.
What happened was Jason drowned. He did drown, but the currents are a little funny in Crystal Lake. He washed up on the other side.
Who knows how he managed to survive on his own?
He could have eaten anything. Rabbits, bears, maybe a little Shih Tzu coming through the woods.
So you're telling me that all these years he spends growing up in the wilderness, he's out in the wild, he never seeks help. He never looks for his beloved mother.
Take Alice Hardy, the counselor who cut off Mrs. Voorhees' head, dead 2 months after the massacre. It was Jason.
It was a revenge killing all the way.
And even though they never found her body, they found blood. Blood everywhere all over the apartment.
So explain to me, this is an interesting point, explain to me how Jason knew where Alice Hardy lived. Did he look her up in the phone book?
According to her own sworn police statement, Alice Hardy saw a deformed boy emerge from the lake.
She drifted off in a boat, and just before she was rescued, a boy lunged out of the water, a boy with all the physical characteristics of Jason.
There was no boy dragging her underwater. The woman was hysterical. Plain and simple, she fell in. She was damn lucky, too. The sheriff was there to save her.
The timeline makes no sense anyway. I mean, even if Alice had been pulled under the water by some aquatic boy monster, how could it be Jason? Wouldn't he have been full grown by then? He drowned 20 years earlier, but a boy jumps out of the water and grabs her. I call bullshit on that.
What Alice Hardy experienced in the water was what we call a subconscious projection. The suggestion of this drowned child had already taken root in her psyche during her confrontation with Mrs. Voorhees.
Well, who gives two shits either way? I mean, Jason drowned, his mother got what she deserved, and that was the end of that business. All the insanity that followed was just a bunch of nut jobs trying to bring the legend to life.
What about the eyewitness testimony of the survivors and the hundreds of residents who claim to have seen him? Are we just supposed to disregard all of that?
They each described the same killer, except for one key difference. In one instance, he was wearing a burlap sack over his face, a potato sack. Next time he was seen up at Higgins Haven, he had on a hockey mask.
The kind goalies wear.
My son Shelley was killed that weekend. He was my whole world. He went up to the lake with Andy, his roommate, and some friends, and I never saw him again. Oh, Shelley. Who's this guy? Is this the guy that did it? Is this the guy?
I think so.
What's that on his face?
It's a hockey mask.
Oh my. That hockey mask is from our team. That's a Red Hawk mask. I know because it's got the red arrows on it. Oh my God, he must have stolen that from Shelley, and right before he killed him. He was a funny kid. He used to like to play practical jokes, you know, and he liked to kid with people, and I guess this time the joke was on him.
The suspect responsible for the lakeside slayings this weekend was struck down by a fatal axe blow to the skull. His body will now be moved to the Wessex County morgue, where it will be identified and autopsied, pending an official investigation.
As it turned out, the suspect was never identified because that same night his body was stolen out of the hospital.
It was not stolen. It was Jason. He survived that axe wound to the head and then went right back to Crystal Lake to carry on his killing spree. That's the only explanation.
It's the only one that makes sense.
Science.
How does a body that's been examined by a coroner, pronounced dead on arrival, get up out of a freezer and walk out of the county morgue?
Gee, I don't know, man. Why don't we ask Axel, the medical examiner who put Jason on ice in the first place? Oh yeah, I forgot. We can't ask Axel a thing. He doesn't have a head. The old hacksaw mambo, courtesy of Jason. What about Robbie Morgan, the nurse on duty that night? Gutted like a fish on Jason's way out the door.
Is it possible to survive a direct axe wound to the head? Well, there have been rare cases where people have survived shrapnel bullets, even whole blades being driven directly into their skull, and they've recovered completely. If the wound was superficial enough, I guess it's not out of the question.
Jason returned to the area that was familiar, the woods of Crystal Lake, where he happened upon the home of the Jarvises, a recently divorced mother and her 2 children, a 17-year-old Trish and a 12-year-old named Tommy.
Other than Jason himself, Tommy Jarvis is the most significant figure in the Crystal Lake saga. Here is a boy who stepped up and did what no adult could do. Tommy brought Jason literally to his knees.
Well, that's about the biggest pile of horse manure I've ever heard. Whoever killed those people at the Jarvis house that weekend sure as hell wasn't the same person who escaped from the morgue. It could have been an accomplice or another copycat. It sure as hell wasn't Jason Voorhees.
Oh, Tommy was a bit of a precocious child. He had a great imagination. He used to draw the strangest things when he would come to class. Always had me a little bit concerned about what he was doing and what he was thinking a lot of the times.
This kid was a genius at making latex monster masks. We're talking the kind of masks that would make Don Post shit himself with envy. He was so dedicated that when he came up against Jason, he beat him by turning his own face into a mask.
He actually transformed himself into Jason.
That's right, he seized the opportunity. He confused the killer just long enough to bring him down.
Tommy's act of transforming his appearance into one that would be instantly familiar to the killer was like holding up a mirror to Jason, or at least who he thought was Jason.
What that son of a bitch did, there's no words to describe. However much that maniac got what he deserved, Jarvis kid, he just went over the edge.
Tommy was in such an emotional state, they had to hospitalize him. It was awful losing his mother that way. It's just so hard to believe that it even happened.
Tommy Jarvis became, for all intents and purposes, a catatonic. He couldn't assimilate back into daily life, so his sister reluctantly had him committed to a state mental hospital where he remained until the age of 18.
The other thing that Crispin did that I think is, just, like really very odd and very good for the movie is the dance that he does. That crazy, I mean, you've never seen a dance like that. We didn't design it. I was told that Crispin does that dance around town. He was doing it in clubs at the time. I think that the first take, we lost the first take because people were just so astounded by how it looked. I mean, the other actors in the scene could not really play their parts after seeing it. But we did it a few times. Everyone was just wide-eyed when he did it in the first rehearsal. And we were playing some kind of track, and someone has subsequently said that they thought it was AC/DC. I'm not sure what we played, but believe it or not, I think Crispin would have done that same dance if we were playing, Happy Birthday to Crispin.
how come you turned that off?
Three times before, you have felt the terror, known the madness, lived the horror. But this is the one you've been screaming for. Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Jason is back. He moves like a shadow, dark and silent.
Sorry you changed your mind?
He never utters a word. He doesn't even seem to breathe.
Where the hell's the corkscrew?
He simply, mindlessly, mercilessly kills. But now, Jason's reign of terror is over. Friday the 13th, the final chapter. Friday, April 13th, is Jason's unlucky day.